What's up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com, or, of course, if you are watching on our fast-growing YouTube channel, that's Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner, joining me as he always does for another episode of the UNC Football Show. It's our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. And AJ, we got a jam-packed show ahead, despite the Tar Heels on spring break right now, not practicing at this current moment. They are on spring break this week. We'll resume practice on March 21st. So just a little recap for people who don't know. We did another show, I guess it was a week or two ago now, when spring practice was getting ready to start. Started on March 5th, again on spring break this week. They come back on the 21st, and spring practice ends on April 15th. So, AJ, I want to start with looking back for you, because I know last week you were at an open practice for the Tar Heels where you got to see some things, got to go in there and observe, them in person for the first time this spring. So we'll start offensively. I know we were talking about this a little off camera, so I'm actually excited to hear this too, because you didn't go in depth on every kind of impression you had on individual players. But offensive wise, any players or things that stood out from that open practice?
Yeah, and just to give full detail here for a second, we had an open practice for the media. It was the second practice. They started on Sunday the 5th. Mm-hmm. They had a practice Tuesday and Thursday. We got to watch the whole practice Tuesday, and then afterward we talked to Cedric Gray, Drake May, and then we talked to the coordinators, Chip Lindsey and Gene Chizik. So we got a lot of really good stuff for one day, and the next day launched back into basketball. What was left of the basketball
what was
season.
Left of basketball.
So I got to be honest with you. The guy that stood out the most has the name Walker on the front of his helmet. The new guys have little name stickers. Believe it or not, they do that in college too. And it was Tez Walker. Just, whoa, hey, there's Tez. He's a guy. He's a perfect example of why a lot of times the recruiting rankings don't really do much, because he originally went to Central. He's from the Charlotte area. He originally went to Central, but they didn't have football, so he went to Kent State. And Kent State, Mid-America Conference, good football, really good football. That league sends dudes to the NFL every year. It's sort of in between, the ACC and maybe what would be the lower tier of FBS. They've had plenty of really good teams. A lot of really good coaches go through the MAC. In fact, Carol, Miami, Ohio used to be called the cradle of coaches. So the MAC is good football. Yeah, and a lot of people fixated on what Tez Walker did with 100 some odd yards receiving at Georgia last year. But it's the whole of his game, and how you saw later in the year opposing defenses just fixated on trying to slow him down. So he's a dude, and there are dudes in the MAC, and now he's a dude that left the MAC and came to North Carolina. I think he's going to be the go-to guy, if not the go-to guy, one of them. They got two good receivers in the portal, because Nate McCollum looked really good too, kid from Georgia Tech. But I couldn't take my eyes off Tez Walker. And also, I got to be honest with you, Andre Green, who was banged up last year, and seeing him run routes, I don't see any reason why. And I know Lonnie Galloway talks about this a lot. I want to use 8 to 10 guys. I don't see any reason why they can't at least go 6 or 7.
Yeah.
I think they've got the numbers, and it helps the fact that they got McCollum and Walker in there. Everyone else has embraced them. I watched a lot how they interacted with teammates. And one of the things about the instant eligibility portal era, a lot of people expressed concern about, was how do the holdovers respond to these guys? And in the short period of time that we've seen this so far, I think it's pretty positive. I really liked how the Carolina basketball players embraced Brady, and they embraced Pete, and he was one of the guys. And I think what we're seeing in football, some of that as well. Corey Gaynor last year, Noah Taylor last year, and we're seeing that right now on a big time level. Some of the louder voices that I heard at practice, guys like Walker, guys like Amari Gaynor, who's on the defensive side of the ball, who came in from Florida State, an accomplished player from Florida State. I think that the kids have adapted to this very quickly on these teams, because ultimately they want to win. And getting a guy like Walker and getting a guy like McCollum in there makes Carolina better immediately. They lose Antoine Green. They lose Josh Downs, obviously. I'm not going to say that these two kids are the same thing. I think they can produce as much or more, but do it in a different way. And that's okay, because I do think there's going to be there are going to be some subtle differences in the way Carolina goes about the pass game. Maybe not as much finding grass, maybe a little bit more scripted, maybe other stuff. We'll have to wait and see how things play out. But he jumped out, McCollum jumped out, and there are a lot of guys jumped out on the defensive side. And I'll tell you another thing, too, about offense is Tad Hudson has dropped a little bit of weight, and he throws a nice ball. And I talked to somebody who's close to the situation who said that, and I'm not going to give the percentage, I don't think it's fair for his teammates, but there were a high percentage of drop passes the last 2 years in high school. So a lot of people have been very down on Tad because of a low completion percentage. But, if you throw a perfect ball and the guy drops it, it counts as your incompletion. So he dealt with a lot of that. I think that they are pleasantly surprised that Tad has been a little bit better than they anticipated this early in the process. You could ask me a lot more questions about guys, and I'll be happy to, because I don't want to run on for like 15 minutes here, but that's what jumps out initially. But there were a lot of other things that I enjoyed and watched, including the offensive line and the way Randy Clements goes about things and some of the drills that they were doing, that I observed and I said, okay, this is different. And if people are looking for optimism, I saw some reasons for optimism.
Yeah, to stay on the offense just for a second, what about Chip Lindsey? I know you talked to him, but what about his in practice? What was he like during practice? What was he kind of doing?
He didn't stand out. Phil stood out more. I have to get used to Chip. There was so much to look at. I didn't really focus a lot on him. I was looking more at the players, in part because I'm going to have more practices to observe. And eventually I'll kind of zero in on Chip. I was used to Phil doing things the way he did it. And he kind of stood out because of where he stood during practice. And he's just kind of someone that grabs your attention maybe a little bit more than Chip. I think Chip's the kind of guy who can go through an airport. A lot of people never suspect he's a college football coach.
Yeah, Phil looks like a football coach.
Yeah, and that's not a criticism at all. It's just that he doesn't sort of jump out at you. I will say that I really like the tempo of what the offense was doing. And tempo is very, very important. Phil was hell-bent on fast. I think Lindsey's fast, but you got to be a little bit more organized. And one of the things that we'll see, I think, is a difference, an improvement from what Phil did was so many of the RPOs that they ran before. There were sometimes a misunderstanding from the linemen about when the ball is pulled, when there's a pass being attempted, which is why you had a high number of illegal receivers downfield. They would release. When you're a lineman, on a certain play, especially like screen plays or short pass plays, you kind of have a drum beat in your head, one with the cadence, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000 release. You have an assignment, the line of scrimmage, and then you want to release and get downfield and kick out a corner or a safety or an offside linebacker, or whatever the case is. And sometimes guys would release. Ed Montilus was probably most guilty this last year. He would release and the pass play was still forming. And it'd be an illegal receiver downfield. What I gathered, and this is just a very brief sample, and I'll have to see more of it, was that there might be a little bit more organization with that, with what they do now. Because one of the things that Mac talked about when he put a bow on the season was they've got to limit those kind of penalties, because often an illegal receiver downfield, a lineman releasing too soon, has no bearing on the actual play. And they had a lot of gains called back. So it's not just the 5 yards that you lose or something like that in a play like that. It's the 18-yard play that gets brought back. So suddenly the offense loses rhythm. And the offense kind of got in the way of its own rhythm too often last year, especially late in the season. So I think rhythm and cohesion that is part of rhythm is going to be a point of emphasis this year. So if they are successful in implementing that, you will see fewer illegal receiver downfield penalties from the Tar Heels.
Yeah, it'll be interesting as we get some more open practices, like you said, to kind of see how the offense evolves under Lindsey during the spring. I'm interested to get my eyes on it as well, because I think it's going to be a fun thing to kind of see, trying to implement a new style of offense, like you said. So we'll flip over to the defense.
I did watch, let me jump in before we go defense. Let me jump in real fast. I did watch the offensive line a lot, because you know how I love the offensive line. I could sit there and watch offensive line stuff forever. Maybe I'm an offensive line nerd, but I really do enjoy it.
Right?
Oh yeah, but still, I just love it because it's such an important part of the game, and a lot of people don't fully understand what's going on down there. And I like to see the way offensive line coaches go about things. I like the way Jack McNeil a year ago made them more aggressive at the snap with the pass protection, but as it turned out that they weren't as physical as they needed to be. You know, being quick on the snap, and then what do you do after that? You got to be able to sustain it, and they had trouble sustaining it. I don't know yet what we're going to see from Randy Clements, but they did a drill where it was a footwork drill about keeping your feet wide and having the proper balance, which makes it easier to sustain a block when a lineman during pass rush, when someone's going to roll or use the various techniques that pass rushers use. I don't even know what it was. I got to find out, but it's this thing between their legs. I think I tweeted out a clip that we could run at some point, but it's this thing in their legs that keeps their legs spread. I don't even know what the heck it's called. Don't know how to describe it really, but it was really neat. I'd never seen that before. And so eventually when I get a chance to talk to Randy Clements or one of the offensive linemen, I'm going to ask them about it. But I think technique is being preached more now than it was before. Now, Stacey Searles was big on technique. He's a much better offensive line coach than Carolina fans gave him credit for. You know, there were some issues between Stacey and Phil that I think was a problem there as well, because I think Stacey's approach is one way and Phil kind of wants it another way. Yeah, so that's one of the reasons I think maybe Stacey left. But it's going to be interesting to see how the raw fundamentals take shape with the offensive line, because there were times where it wasn't great last year. And that's sometimes you get beat on a pass rush. You can win the engagement for 80% of the engagement, and then with the pass rusher makes a move and gets the best of you and then gets to the quarterback or flushes the quarterback out of the pocket, you lose. So you have to win 100% of the snap, not 80% of the snap. And I think some of the technique that they're working on is to increase the percent of the snap that each guy wins, because that will determine whether or not there's a pressure or a sack. And I think later, as the year went on last year, they lost more and more of those battles as the numbers bared out. So another thing, Zach Rice, excuse me. Zach Rice. Zach Rice is kind of trimmed. He looks a little bit more fit. Spencer Rowland looks a little bit bigger. And what I'm hearing about Spencer Rowland is that now that he's having a full normal offseason at a Power 5, because remember, he didn't have that last year. He came in from the Ivy League at the end of May, 1st of June, and then was starting 2 months later, and people were critical of him. The belief in the program is that he has tremendous potential. He's got great leverage. He looks the part. He's playing out left tackle right now. He looks the part. He's bigger. He's stronger. He's going through the full normal P5 off season now, and there's a tremendous amount of optimism that he could be an outstanding player next year. That fans will be pleasantly surprised when they see the steps forward that he takes in his game. So that's early in spring practice, but those are the things that either I've observed or that I've been told by sources very, very close to the situation, especially with respect to Rowland. They think that there could be a future beyond UNC for him in football.
Yeah, no doubt. It's going to be interesting to see how much better he looks when the games come around too, because like you said, I know he's been very highly touted behind the scenes by people really close to him. So looking forward to seeing how his development continues. And like I said, having a spring's massive. Having a normal off season when you're in the program, in the weight room, following that program along with everybody else is massive. Everything. So don't be surprised if he does have a better year because of that, because it is massive. Preseason is
food, everything, what he eats, what he drinks, everything is kind of on your own a little bit more in the Ivy League.
Yeah, no doubt. It's not the same.
And so I think that's really cool. I'm so glad that he has a second year, because whatever kind of football player he can be, I think people are going to see that this year. And that's pretty cool stuff.
positive for North Carolina for sure. Let's flip over to the defensive side. I know off camera you mentioned guys like Elijah Huzzy, kind of Will Hardy standing out a little bit. Give me some insight on the defensive side and like I said, guys or things that stood out from open practice.
Yeah, the Will Hardy stuff. Will wasn't participating. He was in a red jersey, but I happened to stand next to him during a lengthy drill where it was receivers versus DBs. And you basically had the back seven out there on defense, and they were doing stuff. And it was running back, tight end, receivers, and then the quarterback. And they were running a lot of stuff. And Will Hardy, his dad's a football coach. I mean, this kid is just wired for football. And I really enjoyed listening to some of the things he's yelling to teammates. And this is important. I'll get to that why in a second. And there were a couple times where, a play would come right down. I'm standing right on the sideline next to him. Plays would come down the sideline. DB would come back sort of near the sideline, and the stuff that Will would shout out to him. It's like, yeah, coach's kid.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some serious IQ stuff.
You
But I'm
just
thinking
tell,
he's just 19.
Yeah.
He's just 19. And you could tell that he just kind of carries himself like, sort of like, this is not my group because he's not at that point yet. This is Cedric's defense, obviously. But I think that's a voice that people will hear. And I just love the confidence, the football IQ and the confidence. So nothing major with his injury situation. He'll be fine, but expect to see him probably start, play a lot. And I think he's got a chance to be a fantastic player. And I enjoyed getting a little bit of that insight standing next to him during that portion of practice. Some of the guys that stood out, Amari Gaynor is going to be, he's kind of built for the jack position. And he came to Carolina to play jack. He there is no jack in Florida State. And he said, I want to get to the NFL. And there are more and more jack-like positions in the NFL than there used to be. And so that's why he came to North Carolina, to get to the NFL. That is a stepping stone to the NFL for him. He kind of maxed out at Florida State, and he looks the part. Kamen Rucker, right now he's working solely at jack. Now there will be a time where he'll get some reps in practice at rush end because they might need him there as well. Right now he's strictly a jack, but I asked Gene about him last week, and he said, yeah, he can absolutely see a scenario where Kamen gets some reps at rush end and also gets some reps at jack, because a lot of times there's only one jack on the field.
Yeah.
So maybe this year there might be more, maybe two more often. I think one of the reasons there was only one last year at times was because after Noah Taylor, there was a drop off.
Yeah, it was.
And they moved Kamen there after Taylor's injury, and voila, Kamen was able to handle it somewhat. So there wasn't a great deal of confidence in Chris Collins at the jack. So now if they're really confident in two jacks, you might actually see two of them on the field in a variety of roles. So I think some tweaks on the defensive look might be in play here coming up this season because of the personnel. And that's where you have the experience with a guy like Chiswick, who coaches the jacks, by the way, where his vast experience is you can take your parts and move them around. You don't have to try to fit them into a cookie cutter. You can amend the cookie cutter itself into different shapes and sizes according to personnel. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see something like that as well. And then if you want me to talk about Elijah Huzzy, he kind of jumped out at me because he's really solid. He looks a little thicker than you might see from a corner, but they really like him. He's got a nose for the ball. He looks like someone who can hit. And one of the things that they were looking for in the portal was a corner who's not afraid to tackle. A corner who knew how to release and play and come up and play the run. And Huzzy he was tied for the FCS lead in interceptions last season. His coverage numbers are really, really good. But the thing that I think made them really, really like him is that he's a kid who's not afraid to stick his head in there and make tackles. There's a physicality he plays with. He combines the physicality and the finesse at corner. And there's a high confidence level in him being able to cover consistently at the ACC level. So you combine that with someone who's willing to tackle, which I think was an issue at times at corner last year. I think that they're very optimistic about what he can bring them at the cornerback spot. So there are other things that jumped out on defense as well, but that's sort of those are the first things that come to mind.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see how the defense develops under Chiswick this second season, because I think now that he's in. I think you've seen some position group changes, obviously, with some new coaches coming in as well, that will maybe put this staff on a little bit more of the same page that maybe at times they didn't have last year, and certain guys having to do certain things that they maybe wouldn't have liked to do coaching wise. So I'm really interested to see how it develops, especially with these guys. AJ, we talked about it all offseason, really, in the podcast that we've done since the portal, of how Carolina upgraded in the portal in a lot of ways, with looking at the guys who left and the guys they brought in. And I think particularly on the defensive side, with a few of those guys you've named, Will Hardy being a year older, I know he's not participating right now. And you've also got a lot of guys kind of returning on that side of the ball, especially at that linebacker position, veteran linebacker group as well. So I think, confidence in what this defense can do should be on the up and up, because let's not forget too, AJ, like we talked about at nauseum, people don't really like to acknowledge this, but the defense did get better as the season went on. So I think that's a big positive to take into spring. And
I know
it'll be interesting to see what other guys stand out as we get into more of those practices, because I know you're just a one-man show out there that day, so you can't see everything. I know I'm sure there was some other guys out there that impressed too.
Yeah. Well, the linebacker situation, they're great hands with Cedric and Power, but they're really concerned after that. They're really concerned after that. And they were concerned a year ago. Mac only half jokes when he says that he had to remind Cedric and Power before every game. Number one, don't get hurt. Number two, no targeting.
Yeah.
Because we ain't got nothing. We ain't got nothing behind you, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I think that in time that they might have some depth. What really hurts is the fact that Sebastian Cheeks can't do anything physical during spring. Now, he was out doing drills, and he was able to do some things. So mentally, and maybe with some of the quickness, speed elements, he can actually work on that stuff. But he was injured so early in the year last year. You think of all those practice reps that he missed, and then he missed all the bowl game stuff, and he's limited right now. So he lost a lot, and he's someone that I think that they kind of penciled in as being a third linebacker in that room. But I'll tell you one thing. I was really impressed with what I saw from Deuce Caldwell. Now, Deuce is a guy that loves the camera. Deuce is a guy that had the greatest celebration of anybody on the team last year after the sack he had. Yeah. I can't remember which game it was, but he had a sack and he had a phenomenal celebration. That's
Virginia
Deuce.
Tech, maybe? Was it Virginia Tech, maybe? I can't remember. It was one of those games.
It may have been, yeah, it may have been. It was one of the games they won big.
Yeah.
And he's a guy that brings a ton of energy, a ton of flamboyance, a ton of talk to the position, which I think is okay as long as he reins in all the good stuff.
A lot of personality,
But he looked a little fitter, a little trimmer, and he's pretty quick for a big guy. He kind of looks like a throwback linebacker physically. Like he wears big shoulder pads. He really needs to put on a neck roll.
Yeah.
And then he would be totally badass if he put on a neck roll, right? But I think that there's a guy there that maybe he's not ready yet, but down the road could be someone that, if they have to go to someone in that second tier in that room, that he eventually might be ready to help out and be adequate. That was one of the issues that they had with Ra-Ra. It's one of the reasons why Ra-Ra left, is because Ra-Ra's just, at his best, he's 204, soaking wet.
Yeah.
And that's just not doable at that position. And they asked him to move, and he didn't want to. He's like, I'm a linebacker. So he went to go find another home being a linebacker. So they have they're really thin back there as it stands right now, but they have a lot of 12 spring practices and a fall camp to get Deuce more ready to go out there and help if necessary. And they also have time for Sebastian to get healthy and get him going. He's a really smart kid, great athlete. So once he's full 100% go, I think the growth process with him will be very, very quick. And up front, very quickly, Travis Shaw, he was 375 last season. He's down to 350. And what's funny is a couple of reporters came up to me, and a couple of different people in the media came up to me, and I was watching defensive line and said, so you think he's trimmed down? I said, I could see it.
Yeah.
And you could see it sort of right here. And that's good. And the target weight's 335. So he's got another 15 to go. He looked quicker. He looked better.
Yeah.
And the bottom line is that he's a young guy, and he goes about things like a young guy, and the staff has to stay on him a lot, which is fine. That happens a lot with young kids, especially ones with his personality. but they are confident that when he gets to a point where no one has to push him about his weight and the disciplines are all in place, both not just with that, but with every aspect of being a college football player, they believe that he can be an absolute superstar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's talented.
An absolute superstar. I mean, they think everything that they thought he could be before he arrived, they believe can still happen for him. But it's just a matter of the maturity and the disciplines all have to be aligned. And when that happens, they believe that he'll take off. He's not there yet, but there's a strong belief and optimism that he's on course to make that happen.
Mm-hmm. Real quickly, before we move on, I just wanted to ask you about Jaquarius Conley, because I know he is back participating. I know that's a guy a lot of fans were hoping to see last year because of how good he was in his years at Carolina before he had that knee injury a couple seasons ago. So did you get a chance to see him at all? Because I know he is participating.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, in fact, a lot of the time when I was standing next to Will Hardy, when JQ came off, he was on the other side and he would communicate a lot with Hardy because JQ was working at safety. Mm-hmm. And which I think is ultimately his position. He looked fine. You know, he's going to eventually need to have some contact. And he had a little bit when he came back and then had a little bit of the re-injury. Maybe he came back too soon. I don't know. That's probably not fair. That's probably not fair to speculate because I'm not doctor. I don't know what all the specifics were, but he looked good. I asked him how he was feeling. He said, "Great, man, great." Mm-hmm. So, and I did like the way that Hardy was really talking him up. Mm-hmm. You know, was pumping him up. So there might be, look, anybody who's been an athlete before, if you have an injury, especially such a significant one, especially when you're a guy that, quite frankly, you know, someone who had NFL potential before the injury and was playing pretty well, and suddenly you have that long, debilitating stretch where football's taken away from you, it can be extremely difficult to deal with. And there could be a tentativeness once you get back on the field. So they're not wearing pads. They're just in helmets. They're doing stuff. That's different than once, you know, they got in pads, I guess, last Thursday, and things change when you get in pads. You kind of separate a little bit more. So I have no idea what Thursday looked like, but I was really impressed that Will was talking them up, especially when they play the same, you know, they're in the same part of the secondary. I don't think they play the exact same position, but at safety, but they're still in that room, and that's where Will's leadership was standing out a little bit more as well, by the way. But yeah, he looked good. He was really excited to be out there. If you imagine what it's like to be him, he kind of feels like maybe he's starting all over again.
Yeah, in some ways, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But he's starting all over again with the knowledge of everything he's been through and with the maturity that has been required that he have in order to get to this point. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, you know, people say stuff happens for a reason. I believe that that's somewhat true. And for an athlete, sometimes they need to see the world through a different lens. Mm-hmm. And it makes them a better player because they have better perspective. I'm not saying that was needed with JQ. I have no idea. But I've seen that happen a lot with athletes. Mm-hmm. And perhaps that was with him because I know he struggled with the injury a lot. I know he struggled with being out and the doubt about, will I ever be the same again, and all that kind of stuff. So the snapshot I had that one day, and I did watch him a lot. I probably watched 15 reps, 12 to 15 reps, open field reps, coverage reps, that he looked pretty solid. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's JQ, man.
Yeah, he's good. It's a plus.
They were missing physicality in the secondary last year. JQ gives them physicality in the secondary.
No doubt. Yeah, it's good to see him back just from a personal standpoint. Kid going through an injury like that, as good as he was, and basically just missing all last year. It's good to see him back practicing. Absolutely. AJ, we're gonna move it on in a second. Before we do that, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor on this podcast, myperfectfranchise.net. So guys, if you're looking to diversify, looking to lead the corporate rat race, gain control of your own income and schedule, how about having unlimited PTO? And that sounds fantastic to me. Look no further than myperfectfranchise.net. Andy Ludicky, longtime Rivals member, diehard college football fan, big Texas fan as well. So you know he's obviously got a lot of reverence for Mac Brown. And he's a franchise veteran, having done multiple franchises and businesses throughout his long career. So guys, what he does using his expertise is he helps others find their American dream through a thorough and free consultation process. So guys, if you've ever been interested in opening a franchise, there's so many different types of franchises that you can open. It's actually amazing to think about. Talk to Andy, see if it's right for you, and he'll lead you through the process. I think the great thing about it too is Andy doesn't get paid unless you make money. So it's not like, hey, yeah, I'll talk to you for a couple $100 and then, kick you to the curb. Doesn't work like that. He's there to walk you through the process every step of the way. So call Andy, put your life and career in your own hands, 100% free. I mean, at the end of the day, what do you really have to lose? Find your perfect franchise at myperfectfranchise.net. Real quickly as well, links in the description below, but there's also links to 2 podcasts AJ and Andy did a couple months ago. They can explain kind of the business model, how it works, and how you can contact him and get involved a heck of a lot better than I can. So go check those podcasts out as well if you're more interested in learning more. And again, visit him at myperfectfranchise.net. Big thank you to Andy for continuing to sponsor this podcast. All right, AJ, we're going to go probably another 10 minutes. And before we wrap this one up, we're trying to keep this one a little bit shorter, which usually, in fairness for us, probably doesn't really happen, as we like to go long on certain things because there's so much stuff to talk about at the end of the day.
We always shoot for 25 or 30 minutes and we go 40.
Never happens.
Because I'm absurdly long-winded.
So. Well, and again, you're talking about offense and defense, what stood out. We probably could have spent another hour on that if we really wanted to. But yeah, there's just so much from getting to be in practice. But real quickly, and I think this will be a pretty quick one. Talk to me about what the plan is for the rest of spring. Like I said, they come back on March 21st from spring break and jump back into it. Spring practice scheduled to end on April 15th. Can we expect a spring game? Do we have any idea of what that plan is going to look like? Can you give us a little more insight?
Well, I think as far as the on-field stuff goes, they were hoping to have the full install of the offense in by Thursday, and then they're off for 10 days or whatever it is. So they'll probably do a quick reinstall or a refresher course when they come back for the next practice, which I believe is next Tuesday.
I believe
next Tuesday.
Yes, I believe so. I think that's the 21st.
So by the time the 4th practice is over, they'll completely have the offensive install. And there are tweaks in the offense. There's some more drops in the pass game. So like Drake will drop a little bit more. So that's one of the noticeable differences. You'll see more throwing to the running backs out of the backfield. That's another difference people will see. As far as defensively, I do think that there are tweaks as well. They don't have to do an install per se, but I think finding what tweaks they'd like to do, they're going to be in the process of seeing what they think works, putting guys in roles or give them an assignment on a certain situation to see how they handle it. So they can, I think, more than see what they can do, they're going to try to figure out what they can't do. And so they know what their parameters are once they get into the fall. As far as spring game goes, right now, I don't know. We haven't talked to Jeremy in a week or so, or Mac. Mac has said a couple of times that, and others have said, there's just not tremendous value in the spring game anymore.
Even from a media perspective, there isn't. I mean, how many times have we?
From a media perspective, there's very little.
Yeah, guys show out in the spring game and you never see them again, so you don't really get a lot out of it.
Yeah, writing stories about some 48th string running back getting running for 92 yards and a touchdown in a spring game, it's just wasted keystrokes.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't mean anything. And one of the concerns about a spring game with this particular team is they went into spring with I think 11 guys not available for contact. Okay. And then you think that they started spring with 19 new players. Mm-hmm. When you think of the 10 freshmen that came in or as early enrollees and the 9 transfers. So that's 19 guys plus that's 30 right there. That hadn't been around before. And then you got to figure there's going to be some guys that get hurt during the course of camp. And so by the time they got to a spring game, their numbers, and I'm not saying that the new guys wouldn't play, but they're not going to put a lot of the freshmen out there to play a ton when they're not ready to play a ton. Mm. And even some of the transfers, maybe they would need to get out there and play a little bit, but they can do that in segmented scrimmages in practice. So they think that they wouldn't have enough bodies to actually run a full spring game. They would have some players getting way too many reps, and they don't want that. They don't want to run the risk of injury. And I think when you have 19 new bodies, and then you have a lot of kids from a year ago that were in their first year as holdovers, they believe they would get more out of an actual practice than a spring game. Because what happens during the spring game? 22 guys on the field and everyone else is standing and watching.
Yeah, it's not the same.
But in practice, if you've got 9 different drills going on, each guy's getting a rep every 3 minutes, every 2 minutes. Mm-hmm. You get so much more out of it. So what I anticipate, and this has not been announced yet, my anticipation is that they'll have a football celebration. I think every school's going to end up doing this. spring games might be a thing of the past, is they'll have maybe like a fan fest / football celebration that will be an open practice like the one they had last year after the second practice of fall camp. And in there, they'll have maybe a scripted 22, 25 play scrimmage. So fans could see that. They could see the ones, they could see the twos, and maybe a couple of new guys. And that's that. They get a little taste of, hey, this is real football. But a lot of it's just going to be drills. So you can kind of pick and choose what you want to watch. So if you feel like watching the offensive lineman, you look over there and you watch the offensive lineman, from wherever you are in the stands. If you want to watch the receivers and the running backs, you look over there and watch them. And I think that that's better for fans, especially the junkies. And for the coaches, they just get more reps from kids.
Yeah.
And they could still have enough segmented scrimmages where they can learn something about these kids. I just think it's the best way to go. It's a smart way to go. I think it'll be more entertaining for the fans, and they'll incorporate some fun stuff with fans. So I would imagine there'll be a release at some point in the next week or so people have enough time to plan, because it's April 15th, that's probably what they're going to do. And they're probably looking for a sponsor, and they're going to have naming rights on it. And also they have to talk to TV, because the ESPN and its affiliate or its networks televise these things. So do they want to televise just a bunch of drills, or they want to televise a game? So that may have something to do with it as well. So I would think the drills on TV would be more fun as well, but that's just me. I'm a junkie.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I'm a guy that loves I love. When I covered a little bit of Major League Baseball, I got there 3.5 hours before the first pitch because I wanted to see the backup infielders take infield practice.
Yeah.
Practice turning two in the middle of June, practice turning two. I'm the guy that loves basketball practice, watching cutting drills. I'm the guy that will go to football practice and watch the offensive line do all those drills that a lot of people might be bored with, because I'm, as my wife would say, I'm weird that way.
Hey man, you like the nitty grittiness, not just the what you see on TV. You know what I mean? Which
I get excited for it. I get excited for it.
Even from a football perspective, I do like I get more out of watching individual position group drills and seeing how the coaches interact and coach and how the players respond to it a lot more than I just see a spring game where you got different guys going up against different guys who are never going to play again. So completely agree with that. Keep it locked to TarHeelIllustrated.com, as obviously when that news comes out about the spring game, we'll have it reported on the front page. AJ, last thing I want to talk about. I know Carolina kind of had a plethora of analysts in a lot of ways, and graduate assistant hires kind of announced earlier this week. I want to focus on two, Clyde Christensen and Ted Monachino. Christensen coming in as a volunteer offensive analyst. I think we've talked about him before a little bit in the previous podcast as well. And then Monachino coming in as a senior defensive analyst. And to me, the amount of analysts that are coming into the program, I think, is a huge plus, not only because they bring experience, really good experience, NFL experience too, but it shows me that there's a little bit more of an attention to detail that maybe we didn't see in the first few years under Mac. I know he does have a lot of guys kind of behind the scenes doing things, but it just seems like a little bit different approach from the staff on bringing these guys in. And to me, it's only a positive. The more guys you have with experience, they can focus on little things that maybe other position coaches and Mac doesn't necessarily have time to put as much attention to detail in, is only a positive. So what can you tell me about, I know we don't have to necessarily focus on who they are as coaches, because I know the experience speaks for itself, but what does it tell you about kind of the direction Mac's trying to take this program in? Is what is it, 5th year now? I can't even keep track anymore.
Yeah. With you. Yeah, I think the attention to detail is there. It's just that there's only so much you can do. So what they've done here is they've specialized roles, and and I reported on our board, 2 weeks ago, maybe.
I'm about to say weeks ago,
yeah. 2 weeks ago, that they would bring in a defensive specialist, and he would be a defensive analyst. He would be a pass rush specialist. And that's what Monachino is. I mean, some of the pass rushers he's coached, and this is from the release, Terrell Suggs, Khalil Mack, Elvis Dumerville, CJ Mosley, they need to improve their pass rush. So Mack looked at some areas that needed specific improvement, and that's what he's brought in areas that help the program. So Monachino is a guy that has coached linebackers and defensive line, defensive ends in the NFL for a long time, and he's going to focus on pass rush. They need to get more of a pass rush. This has to be a collective thing, has to be an individual thing, and he's going to just pin his ears back, roll up the sleeves, and dive into pass rush stuff. Clyde Christensen is an offensive mind, a quarterback guru. And where he can really, really help, and Dean and I talked about this in a football recruiting pod we did the other day. Imagine if you're Jake Merklinger, who's our number one target quarterback in the class of 24. He comes up here to visit for the Duke game. They had a bunch of kids up for the day of the Duke basketball game. They all went to the game. Sam Howell was in town. So imagine you're Jake Merklinger, and you're sitting in a room. You've got Sam Howell, starting quarterback now in the NFL. You've got Drake May, maybe the leading Heisman candidate next year, maybe the leader to be the number one draft pick in 2024. Got a Hall of Famer, Mac Brown. You got Chip Lindsey, a guy that you've known for a while and whom you trust immensely. And oh, by the way, here's this guy, Clay Christensen, who coached Tom Brady, Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning, Jameis Winston.
Yeah, it's
won 2 Super Bowls, was just recently Tom Brady's position coach. Mm-hmm. So imagine that scenario. Who else is going to present that to a Jake Merklinger?
Yeah, not a lot of people know.
Yeah. So I think the power packing punch of, wow, these guys, this is serious football here. Mm-hmm. This is a staff that Mac has no problem bringing in other voices. This is not a my way or the highway situation. This isn't a my way is law. Mac, for his age, I commend him tremendously for being highly adaptable and willingly adaptable.
Yeah.
He's okay saying, you know what, that's not working. Let's junk it and try something new, because he wants to win, period. So if it means that this guy gets ushered out and you bring in somebody else, no matter how much you care about that guy, no matter how much you cared about him for 30 years, so be it. You've got to do whatever you got to do to win. And bringing in people who have had tremendous amount of experience at the pro and college level, and certainly the NFL level, because you want every kid that comes in thinks they're going to play in the NFL, most of them. And here you have dudes that know what the NFL is all about. I just think it bolsters the whole operation. The things that maybe could have slipped through the cracks have been missed before because you had fewer people paying attention to detail. Less will get through now. And you're going to have a voice that will be willing to say to Mac, hey, I don't think you guys should do this anymore. Mm-hmm. Because Christensen has nothing to lose. He's been in the business for 43 years. Mm-hmm. He's I'm sure he's got plenty of money. Mm-hmm. I'm sure someone else will hire him. Monachino, same thing. 32 years he's been coaching. Someone else will hire him. So they're in a position of strength where they get to sit down and say, okay, you hire me because I'm an expert at these things. Now let me be the expert.
Yeah.
And for Mac, he's a Hall of Famer because he has allowed people to do their thing. Some of the criticism on him younger in his career was, oh, he's a CEO. He just delegates authority. What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
So
what a good leader does usually.
That's exactly what a good leader does. Successful operations aren't successful because one guy's got his fingers on everything.
No, delegating. Mm-hmm.
You've got to delegate. You've got to set the tone. You've got to lead the coaching staff, and the coaching staff leads the players. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what he's trying to do here. So I commend him with making these moves, including the other ones. They brought in a guy focus on special teams. Larry Porter gets to work more, spend more time with the running backs now. I like the moves that they've made.
Agreed.
It's more big boy.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of analysts at some of these other schools. And, Mac has been able to get more money for assistants. I know what some of the numbers are for some of the position coaches and the coordinators, and it's a nice chunk of change. It's not exactly what some of the SEC schools or certain Big 12 or Big 10 schools are paying, but it's not that far off. So he's finding resources to allocate to the Ted Monchinos and Clyde Christensens as well, because I think it makes the staff that much better. And man, to be a fly on the wall when all those guys are in a room talking shop would be an absolute treat.
Yeah, it'd be fantastic, man. You'd
learn so much. Fantastic. Yeah. Oh my gosh,
it really would.
It would be amazing.
It's a big positive, like you said, recruiting wise for this team, for the coaches. It just, to me, again, like you said, there was attention to detail. There always has been, but when you got more bodies in there, experienced, really guys that are not only just there, they're really good at what they do and have been doing it for a long time at a higher level. I mean, that's a big positive for everybody all the way around. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how, different parts of the offense and defense maybe look better and develop this season because you've got guys in special teams as well, because you got guys in the room that can really focus and hone in on it. So, AJ, we'll go ahead and wrap this one up. I know we were going to try to keep this one at 30, but I think we went a little bit over that as we always do. You know, it's not the THI podcast or a UNC football show if we don't go a little bit over our time limit, for lack of a better word. So appreciate y'all tuning in for another episode of the UNC football show. Keep it locked to TarHeelIllustrated.com for all your coverage from spring practice. Again, Tar Heels will be back in action on March 21st. Should be some open practices as well. When they get back into it, we'll be at. We'll have videos and insight and podcasts from all that as well. So again, just make sure you keep it locked, not only to the website, link in the description below, but our YouTube channel as well. Make sure you check out My Perfect Franchise, 2 podcasts link below. Go check those out to learn a little bit more about what Andy's got going on over there. And again, a big thank you to them for continuing to sponsor. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell as well, so you know every single time we upload. We'll see you all in the next one. Thanks.